Chapter 12, Unspoken. The phone call had left me with a restless energy I couldn't shake. I'd washed the faint traces of paint from my skin, a symbolic cleansing, but the anticipation clung to me. I looked at myself in a mirror. Choosing clothes for his visit felt strangely significant. I had settled on my usual studio attire, worn denim overalls, a simple white tank top, and paint-splattered sandals. Comforting, familiar, me. I let my hair down, the curls cascading around my shoulders, and applied a touch of peppermint lip balm, small acts of defiance against the nervous flutter in my stomach. The final touch, Polo's silver earrings, a cool, constant reminder. A glance at the clock confirmed my anxiety. He was due any minute. The thump-thump of the freight elevator arriving outside made me jump. I took a deep, steadying breath. This was it. I opened the door before he could knock, and there he stood, Polo, looking effortlessly handsome in jeans and a dark blue t-shirt that hinted at the strength beneath. His hair was still damp from his shower. He held a bottle of wine and a bouquet of roses, the same deep crimson as the ones from the rose garden, the same shade as the paint I'd used. My cheeks warmed. "Hey," he said, his voice that familiar low rumble, his blue eyes scanning me, taking in every detail. "Hope I'm not too early." "No, perfect timing," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady. I stepped back, inviting him in. My studio, my sanctuary, was a sprawling open space, filled with the tools and remnants of my creative life. The air always hummed with the scent of paint, turpentine and sawdust. And dominating the center was the behemoth, my unfinished sculpture, a skeletal metal and wood form that pulsed with a raw energy. Polo paused just inside, his gaze sweeping across the space. "Wow," he said, genuine awe in his voice. "This is incredible, Daphne." "It's a mess," I countered, gesturing around, a self-deprecating reflex. "It's beautiful," he insisted, his eyes locking with mine, holding my gaze with an intensity that stole my breath. "It's like walking into your mind." He moved further in, his presence filling the space, making it feel intimate. He placed the wine and roses on a workbench, a deliberate act, claiming territory. Then he turned his attention to the sculpture. "This is it, huh?" he asked, approaching it. "The magnum opus." I nodded, following him. "It's a work in progress," I said. "It's not quite there yet." He circled it slowly, his eyes tracing the lines of the metal, the curves of the wood. "I don't know," he said thoughtfully. "I think it's pretty damn impressive. It's got power, a rawness, like it's about to break free." His words, his perception, sent a shiver down my spine. He understood. He stopped in front of a section where I'd unconsciously incorporated elements inspired by him. I felt my blush deepen. I felt exposed. He reached out and touched the metal, his fingers tracing the lines. This feels familiar," he said, his voice a low murmur, his gaze meeting mine, a knowing glint in his eyes. I couldn't breathe. He knew, he remembered. "The woods, the almost kiss, it's unfinished," I managed, the words a double entendre. He smiled then, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips. "So are we," he said, his voice husky, laced with a promise and a challenge. The air between us crackled, charged with unspoken desires. The scent of the roses, sweet and heavy, mingled with the sharper tang of paint and metal and him. He took a step closer. He reached out and tucked a stray curl behind my ear, his fingers brushing against my skin, the simple gesture sending another shiver through me. "Daphne," he said, his voice a low, intimate murmur, his eyes dark with an intensity that made my knees weak. But before he could finish, before he could articulate the words that hung heavy between us, I closed the remaining space. I stood on my toes, my hand reaching up to cup the back of his neck, drawing him down to me. Our lips met, a tentative touch at first, a question. Then Polo responded, his arms wrapping around my waist, pulling me close. The kiss deepened, becoming urgent, demanding, a release of weeks of simmering tension. My hands tangled in his hair. I tasted the faint trace of mint on his tongue, the raw, masculine flavor of him. He kissed me with a hunger that mirrored my own. His hands roamed over my back, tracing the curves of my body through the fabric of my clothes. I arched my back, pressing myself against him. He broke the kiss, his breath ragged, his eyes dark. "Daphne," he whispered. The intensity of the moment, the vulnerability, the wanting was almost overwhelming. The unspoken desires, the unfulfilled promise, hung heavy in the air. He wanted me and I wanted him. "What is this?" Polo asked after a moment, his fingers tracing a spot behind my ear. A shiver ran through me at his touch. "What do you mean?" I asked. "It looks like red paint." I felt my face turn the same crimson hue. Oh, I was painting earlier. Polo looked confused. But I thought you were working on your sculpture? I was, I replied, my voice a little defensive. I am, I corrected. I just took a little break. Inspiration struck. He raised an eyebrow, a skeptical look on his face. Can I see it? My stomach clenched. I hesitated. This painting, it was personal, raw, a visual representation of my deepest desires, sure. I broke away from his embrace. How about some wine first? I asked. With shaky hands, I picked up the bottle while looking around for something I could open it with. Polo chuckled, that low rumble that always seemed to find its way under my skin. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wine key. Let me, he said, taking the bottle from my hands. He expertly uncorked the bottle and poured 2 generous glasses, the deep red liquid gleaming in the fading light. I took a large gulp of the Cabernet, needing the liquid courage. So, he said again, his gaze expectant, show me. I took another sip of wine. Where to even begin? It's a self-portrait, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. And it's a little unconventional. I led him to the canvas, still propped against the wall where I'd left it, and with a deep breath, pulled away the drop cloth. I could feel Polo's gaze on me, on the canvas, a palpable weight. The crimson paint seemed to pulse with a life of its own in the dim light. I finally dared to glance at him. He wasn't judging. He was captivated. He took a step closer, his presence filling my field of vision. He reached out, his fingers tracing the outline of a painted curve on the canvas. A mirror image of the touch I craved. Extraordinary, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. The words, the way he said them, sent a shiver of pure pleasure through me. He turned to me then, his eyes boring into mine. I can see you in this. He understood. I want to see more, he said, his voice a low growl, the words a spark igniting the already simmering tension between us. I want to see all of you, my breath caught in my throat. The audacity of the suggestion, the sheer primal intensity of it, stole my voice. My mind conjured images, his hands on me, his presence surrounding me. My gaze flickered to his. A question, a challenge, a silent invitation. I saw the answer reflected back at me, a controlled desire that mirrored my own, a want that transcended words. I took a step closer, closing the distance between us, the scent of him wide and musk and that underlying intoxicating scent that was uniquely Polo filling my senses. I reached out, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I began, my voice catching in my throat, the words failing me. The reality of his suggestion, the implications, the sheer, overwhelming need, it was almost too much. He saw my hesitation, the flicker of doubt in my eyes. He gently cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs stroking my cheeks, his gaze unwavering. We don't have to, he said, his voice soft, reassuring. Not if you're not ready, but I want to understand you, to explore us. His words, his touch, his genuine vulnerability broke through the last of my resistance. The fear, the doubt dissolved, replaced by a fierce, undeniable longing. A slow smile spread across his lips, a smile that was both inviting and incredibly tender. He lowered his head to kiss me again, softly, sweetly. He pulled me close, his body pressing against mine. He kissed me, a slow and deep kiss that was both a promise and a question.